Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May meetup for Data and the Greater Good. I'm Elaine Gamble, community leader of Data and the Greater Good, where our focus as a community of over 2,000 is the use of data in mission-driven organizations, healthcare, education, volunteerism, social justice, among others. Organizations come and talk to us about the use of data and how data advances their mission and the value they bring to their audiences. And we've really had some phenomenal speakers tonight and are so honored to welcome back Datakind. I am joined by my colleague, Bill Prickett, who is leading the video recording of tonight's session. Bill, thank you so much for that. And also joined by my colleague, Maura Fields, who leads social media for Data and the Greater Good. We're so happy to have Maura on board and on the team.
Hi, everyone.
So Datakind is an organization that is committed to the use of data in service to humanity. And our talk tonight is related to COVID-19 hesitancy and the use of social media to combat that. We're honored to have with us Phil Azar, data scientist from Datakind. With the large-scale distribution of COVID-19 vaccines underway, strategies are needed to ensure trust and acceptance for the vaccines and those who deliver them. While social media platforms are known to house much of the conversation around COVID-19 and vaccine, community partners may not have the available data to make sense of all that is available to them in information and areas related to vaccine distribution, trust, and usage. And they're missing an opportunity to use knowledge to inform outreach and education efforts in their communities. Partnering with Datakind and using multiple open data platforms, volunteers analyze trends in public sentiment using COVID-19 and the COVID-19 vaccine in relation to government or government distribution plans and local uptake and perceptions about the vaccine, helping the government support local communities in providing services and getting the public vaccinated. Datakind has partnered on this project to allow for the assessment of social media data for real-time monitoring for vaccine trust and to provide another resource for policymakers and implementers looking to increase vaccine literacy and acceptance in their local communities. We have with us tonight Phil Azar from Datakind. Phil is a data scientist who believes statistics should be simplified and analytics should be accessible. Prior to Datakind, Phil worked as a data scientist for a large retailer, a research analyst for a media company, and a math teacher. He's a lifelong learner. He keeps up with the latest in machine learning, data science, and civic tech. When not trying to solve the world's most pressing problems with data, he enjoys running, cooking, and writing. Phil will give a talk for approximately 30 minutes. And if you have questions, you can type your questions into the chat box. And once he's finished presenting, I will call on you to share your question, or I'm happy to share it for you. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to talk on combating COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy with social media listening. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thank you, Elaine. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here. Tonight, I'm going to talk about how Datakind is using social media data to understand and combat vaccine hesitancy with our partners at Convince. A little bit about me. I am the technical lead and data scientist for Datakind. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Prior to Datakind, I was a data scientist for a large retailer and a data analyst for a media company, as Elaine said. As a technical lead at Datakind now, I lead the scope, design, and execution of Datakind's data science work across our impact practices of frontline health systems and economic resilience. Tonight, I'm going to speak about a project we began during our March Data Dive, a marathon-style weekend-long virtual event where pro bono data scientists and experts came together with our project partner to solve the problem of vaccine hesitancy using social listening. So a little bit of background on who Datakind is. to add to what Elaine had, we are a global nonprofit that we use data science and AI in the service of humanity. Founded in 2012, we work in partnership with social impact organizations to advance their missions and develop data science solutions to the problems that they're looking to solve. We do everything from building data pipelines and databases to machine learning and AI to robust data analysis. So what does all that mean? And what do we actually do? We help organizations identify their data scienceable problems and solutions. We then will staff a team of volunteer data scientists, and build with, not for, our partners to make sure that the solution meets their goals and it's something that they can actually use. We do this through multiple tiers of program engagement. Our Data Corps project is our long-term solutions, where we're staffing a team of 6 data scientists, and we are working for 6 to 9 months building an end product, an end solution. A data dive event is an event where we have hundreds of data scientists from around the globe gather for a weekend long to test hypotheses and drive towards proof of concepts. And we also have community events with our chapters or with Datakind Global, where we really help organizations on a local level and partnering on kind of problems that are on for local nonprofits or local organizations. Each project that Datakind solves centers around one of our 2 impact practices, as I mentioned, frontline health systems or economic resilience. Leading into today's topic of combating COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy falls into our frontline health systems impact practice, and the work was accomplished over our March data dive. The content's going to focus on what a team of 20 pro bono data scientists accomplished over a weekend, and what we kind of our thoughts can drive towards. So what could be that long-term solution to COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and public health challenges abroad. So a little quick set on like what Datakind has accomplished to date, really amplifying our 10 years across sectors and across the globe. Really calling out the pro bono services we deliver to these organizations. These organizations have data science problems, they have data, but the resources to solve these problems using data science are hard to find and expensive, and Datakind lives to fill that gap, to really bridge what is possible with what people need. So now we're going to move into the problem that we faced today. Our partner, Convince, is a coalition of public health organizations. Their central mission is increasing COVID-19 vaccination rate. So they came to us with this pressing question: why are people hesitant to receive the COVID-19 vaccines? The pandemic in America, the problem right now in America is not supply for the vaccines, but demand. Based on research from Pew, 50% of US adults are hesitant to getting vaccinated. This number is specifically salient because US is currently about 50% vaccination rate. So we're currently approaching this expected wall of vaccine hesitancy, and how can we increase vaccine uptake? And as we know, the pandemic is defined to achieve herd immunity. Public health experts say you have to get about the 70 to 90% herd immunity from vaccines or from natural immunity. So how do we convince that extra 20 to 40% of people to get vaccinated and hopefully end this pandemic? However, the problem isn't just confined to COVID-19. In 2019, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, WHO identified vaccine hesitancy as a pressing threat to world health. With our partners at Convince, they wanted the answer in the short term of why are people vaccine hesitant and provide a solution that can be used now as well as in the future. One route to kind of fight vaccine hesitancy, to understand that why, we could spend a month collecting survey data, weeks analyzing that data, and come back with some answers. This process would be slow, it would rely heavily on human subjectivity, and would be difficult to reproduce, as well as it wouldn't be timely when you're fighting a pandemic and a rapidly evolving public opinion. Text data on social media platforms, on the other hand, offers an ocean of information about how people are feeling and thinking in real time. Accessing, cleaning, and understanding this vast data source could lead to a faster solution, a more reliable solution, and something that could be reproducible for not only this pandemic, but for future pandemics. So our approach, the framework that we wanted to use, was to use streaming social media data, this pool of information where people proclaim their identity, their intuition, their opinions, and reactions in real time, to answer why people are vaccine hesitant. We wanted to make this data accessible to our partners and marry it and make it available to marry it with publicly available data on COVID-19 cases and vaccinations or demographics. Making this accessible might flesh out trends or interesting correlations. Next, we wanted to leverage NLP techniques to really get at what and how people are talking about the COVID-19 vaccine online. This enables us to turn raw text from social media into insights and actions for Convince. Finally, a lot of data science is often retrospective or reactive. But in a fast-changing environment online where opinion and trends can change quickly with a news cycle or a new viral piece of misinformation, we wanted to enable Convince to be proactive and deliver prescriptive solutions. What topics online will be trending next week? What interventions can change the current opinion? So what data did we use? So keep in mind, this was for a data dive hackathon weekend in early March, where we were looking to test hypotheses and build proof of concepts. Using Python and open source libraries, we built bots to scrape Twitter, Reddit, and New York Times headlines and store this data in an accessible format. You can access this data through open source APIs. It stands for Application Programming Interface. However, most social media platforms have access restrictions on the amount or the historical data you can scrape through these APIs. Twitter, for example, you can only scrape in the last 7 days, and New York Times headlines can only access in the last 30 days. And Reddit has a request limit of how much information you can scrape off their website. I mentioned that you can purchase API access, which is to get more data, which is the route we'll go when we want to productionalize a full-scale product. But for this hackathon, we needed a subset of real data where we could build a proof of concept on. I'm going to give a brief overview of NLP, and I'll touch on each of this throughout the presentation. People might be new to data science or new to NLP, and so I'll kind of give a high-level voice overview about what NLP is. NLP stands for natural language processing. It is a subset of machine learning that transforms raw text data into insights. It can answer what people are talking about, how people are talking about certain keywords or topics, and it can be predictive and it can inform communities of topics. NLP is a whole body of machine learning, and it's often done in concert with supervised learning or deep learning techniques. Any one of these topics you see here could be a full 2-hour presentation in and of themselves. So if you have any questions at all, I'm happy to address those in the Q&A part. But this is just going to give you a high-level overview of the techniques we used and kind of why we use them. We want to drive in like what people are talking about, how are people talking about it, and what will people talk about. All right, so we have the problem, we have the data, we now have our NLP approaches And as every data scientist knows, it's just, it's just smooth sailing. You throw the data at the machine and it learns and it's beautiful. Not really. That's not what happens. Cleaning data is always the biggest and most important part of the data science journey. Over the weekend, the team identified known and novel techniques with handling social media data. And they were able to document these for any future projects that might require scraping social media data. So I highlighted a few here that were of interest. So social media specific words like retweet or LOL, we want to put those in a place where NLP can understand. So remember, NLP and machine learning, they're really finding patterns over different and similar text. And so we want to make sure that these patterns can be captured easily. We also saw that hashtag cases fell into like two distinct categories. One was hashtags in the middle of the tweet, and then there'd be hashtags kind of trailing a tweet just as like tags onto a tweet. So we actually parsed out the text for any hashtags in the middle of a sentence to make it a coherent sentence. And if it was trailing, it's not really a coherent sentence. So we removed those and create a separate database of hashtags that linked up to the raw and transformed text. And this allowed our NLP techniques to gain higher coherency scores. Next, Levitizing words to the root. This is a very well-known NLP and NLP technique. So as we know, we're trying to identify patterns across text, but a machine doesn't know that the words ran, run, and running are from the same word. So Levitizing is a way that really takes that word and gets it to its root so that the machines can understand the trends across words. And finally, the hardest part with social media data is that a lot of it's short form text that isn't going to have much information or is really going to create any patterns for the model to learn on. So these will just introduce noise into our analysis and models. So we made the decision to trim any text that was less than 4 words. So now we're going to get into some of our key findings. And the first tip that we accomplished over the weekend was kind of identifying what our people are talking about. So these techniques I highlight here, named entity recognition and bag of words, are gonna answer what people are talking about and their value. So on the left, we have named entity recognition that labels known people or places and structures them by their frequency, so that we know what people are talking about and at what volume. So what's interesting in this analysis is that we saw that there was also, while there was a lot of the vaccine providers were obviously some of the type ones, Pfizer, Moderna, there's a lot of chatter around states, specifically around state laws, and there's and state accessibility to the COVID-19 vaccine, as well as government officials. We saw Biden and Trump and other government personnel. On the right, this is a bag of words about those hashtags that people are using at the end of their sentences. And you see there's a lot of good ones, like vaccine, vaccinated, vaccines work, that are getting high volume. But there's also some interesting trends like fire Fauci, big pharma, herd immunity, wear a mask. So now that we've identified, so this identifies like what people are trying to tag onto their tweets. The takeaway here is, now that we know what and who is being talked about online, this can help us kind of dive into, well, how are they talking about these people and why are they talking about these people? This is a very similar analysis here. N-grams take multiple strings of words used together. So like idioms or sentences to kind of see how some certain topics. And here we have analysis our data scientists did that shows trending over time. So it's interesting to see how some of these sentences, some of these more fleshed out ideas rather than singular terms are trending over time. So we see here that there's a huge bump over in early March with white Republicans trending. That kind of makes this interesting about, how did that correlate with any news media, or how can we identify why that's trending? So a takeaway from here would be, this is interesting to start at, what will people be talking about? How can we actually maybe predict these trends over time? And what are people going to be talking about? And what is the causality? What causes these topics to rise and fall over time? Next, we want to go into how people are talking about COVID-19 vaccine online. So the analysis is called sentiment analysis that tags words and sentences based on if it's positive, neutral, or negative. So we saw that majority of tweets on Twitter talking about the COVID-19 vaccine are actually positive. 70% were positive. So this kind of leads us into, that's good. That's about most are either positive or neutral. But what's really driving the words in those negative tweets to be so negative? And what we saw that there is a high negative sentiment around government officials, around such as Trump, Biden, and Fauci, and also state laws and state rollout of the vaccine. Remember, this is early March, so this was still a lot of confusion about who is eligible for the vaccine, where can you get it. So there seemed to be a high negative sentiment and confusion around those. Interesting, and now using the news articles to kind of see if there's any trends there. Actually, most of the news articles were positively sentiment about the COVID-19 vaccine. However, Breitbart, which is an ultra-conservative online publication, was the outlier in this analysis that really showed mean negative sentiment to vaccines. So this kind of leads us to believe that there is an a political identity probably attached to COVID-19 vaccines and the information people are absorbing. Next thing we did is we wanted a topic model. So what were the trends and patterns, in this data? So topic modeling, what that does is it's going to group all these tweets into discrete topics that informs us how people are talking about and who is talking similar. So the 4 topics that we saw that were really salient were vaccine information, pandemic updates, and then one about wellness. The interesting one is topic 3. It's a distinct topic that really focuses around effectiveness and side effects or concerns with the COVID-19 vaccine. This is interesting that this is a distinct online discussion that's happening. And you can see people are talking about sudden death, aborted fetal tissue, and really questioning the science behind the vaccines. The takeaway here is how can we convince the coalition of public health authorities this information? How could they create messaging to debunk or address some of these myths? So now that we know what people are talking online, there's a distinct topic around it. How can we craft personalized messaging targeting some of these myths? We could also identify who is amplifying these messages and target them with personalized communications to better inform the public. That last one I'm going to touch on more with our next around creating community clusters. So community clusters, very similar to topic modeling, where we are finding patterns in the data, but what this is kind of turns this on its head and says, who are like people talking about the same thing. So if you're interested in social network analysis, this combines topic modeling with social network analysis. So who's talking in these patterns? I mean, what are people talking about these patterns, and then who is amplifying in these communities? So we were able to identify about 40 distinct communities, and so I highlighted some of the big ones here. These enable Convince to really target who is living in these communities and what their specific concerns around the COVID-19 vaccines are. So Convince can then actually, craft personalized messaging and target the people who are specifically living and talking in these communities. So we have the top rationalization of general vaccine uptake. Talking about, it's unnecessary to wear a mask, and we don't have to. Why do we need to get vaccinated? Really, kind of, how can we craft messaging that targets these people and their concerns? And finally, this was something really cool that one of our data scientists accomplished. Created a chat bot actually that streams the data in, teaches the bot about how people are opinionated and what people are thinking. And then you can ask the bot a question, and the bot has learned from the vast Twitter community and can answer for you why people don't want to take the vaccines. So this is using transformer models, BERT transformer models on the back end. How those work are that they essentially dig through all the corpus of tweets and to understand how people are talking online, learns from that, and then can connect the question to the answer. So you probably came with this through Siri or Alexa, and here we asked them, why do people want to take vaccines? And we actually got some pretty great answers about, people being confused. Healthcare workers have declined. People who aren't risking it for certain health allergies, and even some demographic information about why people might not be ready to take the vaccine. So, like I said, this was a weekend style hackathon towards really testing these hypotheses and getting to these proof of concepts. What works, what doesn't work, what sticks and what doesn't stick. And so we really want to go is away from a project, these one-off insights, and create a public health tool that can actually classify, find misinformation, and be prescriptive to how we can actually target that misinformation and increase vaccine uptake or increase any public health intervention. So what we found is that we can move from these one-off insights to a place where we can create targeted tools, targeting those users in those communities, targeting those segments with personalized messaging, actually directly addressing their fears and their hesitancies. And we also believe we can predict any misinformation trends so that our partners at Convince aren't reactive to what was said last week, or what did the survey say that was taken over 2 months ago, but what will happen, what will be trending over the next few weeks, what's kind of gaining traction now that they need to get ahead of, and they need to craft messaging, they need to craft public policy to really address those fears. So kind of summarizing, where do we think this potential public health toolkit could go? Really, some of our insights were, there were a lot of positive tweets. So how can we amplify that voice? How can we see what makes people so positive about vaccines and really amplify that messaging? There's a lot of high negative sentiment, though, that 30%, that negative sentiment is really directed towards government officials and state laws. So how can we tailor vaccine information from a trusted voice? or develop public policy that really kind of makes a coherent communication plan for governments. We also see, and that's kind of tied to confusion around accessibility. That was part of that one. We also see these community clusters like I brought up. These are really lend itself beautifully to actually customizing and targeting these communities of people who are discussing in these communities, and they're discussing these specific fears. How can we target them with messages that help debunk or ease those fears? And we can do it online on social media, so it can be a highly personalized targeting message. So we are looking to move forward with this work and hopefully building this toolkit out. And so this call to all you, great data scientists here, that if you want to get involved in Datakind, we have this project, we have other great projects across frontline healthcare systems and economic empowerment. And you can go to datakind.org and follow the volunteer link, or follow us online at Datakind. We'd love to talk more. So thank you for coming and listening to us today, and love to answer any questions.
Phil, thank you so much for excellent presentation on this amazing work, and just so inspiring. Really, really awesome. Lots going on here in the chat box for you, Phil. But before we go into the heart of the questions, we will be sharing a link, a recording link for tonight's talk and a follow-up to YouTube. So look out for that. I think it's a request about sharing his slides. We usually share the link to the recording so that you will be able to hear the speaker again. And there was a question about contacting Phil directly. He has shared his contact information. I will also share it again as well when I follow up with the group as well, so you can connect with Phil directly, if that's okay, Phil? Okay,
Absolutely.
excellent. Okay, so first question, Phil. Curious what is done about words and hashtags. Or Ashley, did you want to ask your question?
Hi, thank you. This is Ashley. I appreciate that. That was a really awesome talk, and I'm new to the field and kind of learning about data science. So my question was really around, my observation when I look at different tweets where sometimes letters are transposed in hashtags or words are misspelled. So I'm kind of wondering if you used any sort of technique to correct for that, or if you just kind of threw out those particular tweets. How did you handle that in this case? Thank you.
That's a great question, Ashley. That is a very concern, especially if you go online and get this raw data online. There are going to be a lot of misspelled. So what we did was we actually came up with a lookup dictionary of words that we wanted to be most salient for. So like words that we kind of knew after about a half day of analysis that we needed to make sure those words were still in there. And so using like fuzzy pattern matching, if the word was like, if Biden was spelled with 2 N's or something, and that's a word that we knew needed to be in this analysis. So if the word looked like Biden, we would actually replace it. Now, obviously we can't do that with every word in the dictionary. So we really want to focus on the 50 or so words that we knew that were super important, and we want to make sure that they were in there. I think if we move when we move towards something more productionalized, there are kind of known methods where you can actually use almost the whole English dictionary to correct those words. But I think that's a great call out. So for this in this data dive, we actually created our own dictionary to clean those words.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Phil. Tally, you had a comment about how come the social sector use natural language processing. Did you want to share that?
Hi, Elaine. Yeah, just to invite folks to, if this is interesting, natural language processing is being used in many different ways to combat things like rumors and misinformation, disinformation in general, but there are many, many other uses of NLP, and Datakind has put together a few examples in an article that we published on the SSIR, Stanford Social Innovation Review. And I just wanted to encourage folks to pop in there, have a look. And of course, our blog is also a really great place to explore more projects where we've actually used NLP and what actions they have led to for our partner organizations.
Thank you, Tally. Josephine, you have a question. You're on mute, Josephine. Did you want to share your question? Okay, I will share it for her. Transformer models sound impressive, and I would like to learn more.
Great. Yes. So transformer models. So to gain sentence structure really requires that sequence of words. The cat ran across the street. Transformer models seek to sequence that data out and put into a numerical information so that like sentences can be mapped together. It's been a huge advancement to do, and it's incredibly difficult to do because the amount of sequence words could take into a sentence is infinite almost. But luckily, we don't have to do that. AI researchers at some of the biggest tech companies publish their models. They're free and available online. You can go to huggingface.com, and that is a community of transformer and NLP models. And from there, you can actually just download these models that Microsoft, Google created, and they could actually help that. And that really helps with actually creating, really advancing this NLP work.
Great. And Tibby Kantrowitz, you have a question.
Hi, yes, my name's Tybee. My question was, now I have to go back and look at it. Oy.
It's about tools used to scrape the data.
Yes, there is so much data there. And I went to your GitHub, which was just really prodigious, by the way. And how did you guys, what was the sequence of actions you took to scrape all of that data? That's question number one. And then my second question, if I may be so bold, was you were talking about the Louvain, something having to do with SNA. And while I love SNA and would like to hear about it, I don't know anything about Louvain anything. And if you could talk about what on earth that is and how you went about doing it and just deep dive into that, that would be great. And thank you. Really great presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you, Elaine, for moderating and putting all this together. This is super awesome.
It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure, Tybee. Phil, your thoughts?
Great. So the first question about what tools you use to scrape the data. So I can link to the GitHub. I see the GitHub's linked, and I scrape with the scrapers in there. So using Python code and API access, you can write code to query like Twitter and extract that data down. And so our approach towards that was the Twitter public API. It limits you to 7 days and 4,500 requests every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So what that kind of limits us a little bit. So we had some workarounds. One, we had a timer on our script that at 14 minutes and 59 seconds would sleep for a little bit and then reboot right up, so that it could always be going, always be on, so that it was continually extracting data and streaming that data into a database ready for this analysis. The second part is that Twitter, you have to submit a query, and so when our query we wanted to be very pointed, like what words we're going for and what hashtags we're going for, So that kind of is like an assumption that comes into this analysis, is that what words do we want to go for? So we were actually just going for any tweets that even mention the word COVID-19 and a word vaccine. So we created two corpuses. One, any words around COVID-19, COVID-19, coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, and then another dictionary of any words that have anything to do with vaccines, vaccine, vaccination, shots, something like that. And so the tweet to get scraped had to have those two instances. It had to have COVID-19, had something that had to do with some of the COVID-19, and had to mention something to do with vaccines. So that, was vague enough to gather like a lot of diversity of opinion, as well as, so we're not getting anything like random in there. And for Reddit data, we kind of had to do another route, because so Reddit, if people don't know, Twitter is kind of like this soapbox and everyone's in the same community. Reddit is like you're in a room with like-minded friends. And so we really want to do is we had to choose the rooms, the subreddits that we wanted to mine. And so we were deliberate about choosing the types of rooms that we thought offered diversity of opinion and relevance. So focusing on certain states that we thought there might be geographical difference, so we could do any trends to compare, the New York Reddit to the Indiana Reddit to the Texas Reddit to the Los Angeles Reddit. Cool. And we also went to some political ones because we had a hypothesis that there's obviously a politically correlation with vaccine uptake. So we went to 20 different subreddit rooms and scraped any comments, any replies, any posts that mentioned the COVID-19 vaccine, kind of using the same methods there. Yeah. And so the next question is about, to be that answer, the
next question is about, I'm sorry, online bots and spammers. Do you want to share your question?
Yeah, so again, just amazing presentation. I really liked learning about a lot of these different techniques that you'll use. But I had a question, and you might have addressed this, but so your slide on topic modeling, I noticed that two of the tweets were the same. Essentially, they're the same text, but they were from different Twitter users. So I was wondering, I read a lot about how there's online bots and like spammers that are very politically motivated or have a certain agenda. And I'm not sure how widespread the problem is in practice, but I was wondering if y'all had any issues with that. Just kind of with like a lot of COVID disinformation seems to be spread by a lot of these spammers or bots. So, did y'all tackle that at any rate?
Yes. And so what we kind of solved was that there was a lot of kind of amplifying of the same tweet. So as you see there with that one, and really what kind of like drives that tweet. There's actually an interesting analysis. I saw an article about how they call it the disinformation dozen, that there's 12 people online who are really driving disinformation. So our partners at Convince actually are working with the University of Alberta to identify who, like the social network aspect of it, but they were missing the NLP part, and that's where we wanted to come in. So what we kind of saw was that there's a lot of amplification around a single idea or a single tweet, but we treated that as a single instance in our corpus, because we wanted to see like if that was distinct or what was that very similar to. Does that kind of answer about like, for this topic modeling specifically, we wanted it to be like a distinct corpus and not have be multiple duplicates. I think that copy and paste there is just showing how people are generally talking about in this same topic.
No, certainly. I think it does. And I think topic modeling as just a paradigm to use kind of solves the issue, quote unquote. So I think that definitely answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, but as far as online bots, I think it's hard to identify online bots. I think that would be a whole nother exercise to, maybe if people are talking too much like each other, that they're probably a bot. I think we've you definitely have seen this in other analyses where, 4 different users, have the same thing. That would be a very interesting analysis. So yeah.
Phil, I have a question for you. Social media is sometimes thought to skew toward a sample of people that may not be representative of the whole. Either they're, some have argued you get more vocal, some have argued more isolated, some have argued it just isn't a sample of people where you could make projections or consider them representative of a larger group of people. So with that in mind, do you have concerns ever that what you're reporting isn't really reflecting the average person that has questions, or the average person may have just questions, but not be as hesitant as you think they are versus a person that says, I'm not doing it? Just your thoughts there regarding the limitations and risk of social media.
I think that's a great call out, Elaine, that, Twitter data is going to be more extreme. So the topics and the keywords and the sentiment might be in those more extreme, might be on the more extreme ends of the spectrum. So I think that's first to address that. It's how do we like talk about this analysis and say this is specifically social media world. We are not extrapolating this, that this is what everyone in America thinks. I think that's very much important. I think the next step is understanding that these are what are like the volume of these concerns and how real they are. When we want to we're telling Convince to address some of these concerns, we don't want them to do it in a way that amplifies a minority opinion, and so then it becomes a bigger problem. So we really want to stage it as, this is how people are talking online. Let's actually marry what we're finding online with kind of what we know in the real world. And that's what working with a partner like Convince, where it's multiple public health organizations across the US that really do have other data sources and other on the ground people to really kind of understand, okay, here's what's saying online, here's saying in reality, what's actually pertinent to the problem. And so that's what we actually want to get at when we get to like a final tool, is a tool that just makes the data accessible and it can be married well to other data sources so that trends can be verified and really more undercovered as why they're happening.
Thank you, Phil. One other question related to the previous one. Are more people actually hesitant, or some they just don't understand the vaccine? There's a difference there, and that's a different audience. And I'm wondering, have you been able to sort out some of those nuances in that a person may just have questions or have fear? There's some communities that have fear around anything related to something medical, clinical trials, et cetera. This was moved through the FDA rather quickly. So what percentage would you say are truly hesitant versus they just have questions, they need a little bit more information to get them over the hump?
That's a great question about, what really defines someone who's vaccine hesitant. And I think that really requires subject matter expertise into the public health world about what is that line and where would you classify someone as being vaccine hesitant. And that's like part of data science, is that we can look at the statistics and the data as much as we want, but we want to know is what would really classify someone as vaccine hesitant versus somebody who is just, maybe they're lightly concerned. When we're talking with Convince, what really classifies them as vaccine hesitant is someone who does not want to get the vaccine. They've already made their stance, and we need to nudge them based on their concerns. for some people who are maybe just curious. And I think when you get to the more granular data, it's like those community clusters, we had 40 of those. You really could drill down into some communities that had like thoughtful opinions and kind of more moderate stance, and really were just kind of information seekers. And we also saw people that had those extreme perspectives. So we kind of need to really understand what is that line, and where do we label someone as vaccine hesitant versus maybe just curious or just wondering or looking for more information. Because I think there's going to be different interventions and actions for those two different people.
So Phil, fantastic talk. And I just wanted to see if you had any final words for the group about Datakind, or anything else you wanted to share about the organization before we wrap up.
First, thank you so much for having me here. This is really fun to talk, and this is a topic that I'm excited about, and I want to progress. In order to progress that, we need great data science volunteers. So if you're looking to get involved, we have multiple projects. If you want to get involved in Datakind, please email me at phil@datakind.org, and go to datakind.org and get involved. We have another data dive happening in September, so you can follow us on social media. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, so thank you again for having me. And Elaine, yeah, thank you for having me. And happy to, if you want to email me and ask me any questions, happy to keep the conversation going.
Well, before we sign off, also wanted to just turn it over to Maura Fields briefly to tell you more about social media, since she's leading social media for Data and the Greater Good.
Hi, everyone. Phil, thank you again for such an interesting talk, and to Datakind for all the very cool work y'all are doing. I am going to put in the chat right now. Data and the Greater Good has a LinkedIn group, and we would love for you, the people who joined us tonight, to join us there. We post the presentations we've done. There's also information on things that are coming up, and sort of trying to keep everyone connected. Shouting out Phil and Datakind and our future presentations. So join us there.
Thank you, Maura. And we also have the YouTube channel as well, Data and the Greater Good. Hope you'll just subscribe. And we're so delighted to have Maura on board for social media. Definitely was a need for us. Also want to announce again that we have a June meeting coming up as well. So look out for that, and we hope to see you there. And that will be with Charity Navigator, discussing charity ratings and perspectives during the pandemic, as well as more broadly. I know that will be a very engaging talk, so we hope you'll join us again in June. And information is or will be on our microsite, but I will follow up with more information about that. Again, I want to thank all of you for attending tonight, and Phil for a very, very engaging and inspiring talk about social media and how it's combating vaccine hesitancy and this important public health issue. Again, we look forward to seeing you next month. Good night, everyone.